Welcome to a special presentation of News Channel 20 as we are live in the House chambers. State House reporter Jordan Abadea, Adam Reif here on the 366th day of the Illinois state budget crisis. Jordan, it's the last day of the fiscal year, another deadline day here for the lawmakers. A hush just now comes over the House as they work through a few other bills, and it's time to get to the big one pretty soon.
This is a large, comprehensive process, and this is a process we haven't seen really play out since Governor Rauner took office. Usually when we see budgets, we see larger deals taking place behind closed doors. It's usually never just a budget. It's never just an appropriations bill. There's usually other things attached to it, and this is what we're seeing this time around. Obviously, education funding was a major sticking point in negotiations. Democrats and Republicans could agree to a lot of the spending. The working group had forwarded leaders that budget outline, but really what was sticking in the whole negotiations was the fact that Democrats want to change this funding formula. That's not going to happen. It's very complicated. The House has a wide variety of lawmakers with varying interests, and so instead they created this poverty grant. They wanted to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into education, more than what Governor Rauner had wanted to do, and so it had turned into, we're not bailing out CPS. That was the governor's rhetoric this entire month, and so that's where that really was a sticking point, and so now we see that CPS is going to get some financial help from the state, but it's predicated on things like comprehensive pension reform, making sure that Chicago increases their own property taxes to help pay for that burden, and things like that. So we're seeing a large budget, and we saw all of those bills pass today with the supermajority, the 3/5 vote that they need out of the House so far.
A big criticism from Republicans was they weren't going to force suburban or downstate taxpayers to pay for the increase for Chicago Public Schools. So as you mentioned, a lot of conditions here before Chicago Public Schools gets that pension parity.
And it's important to note with pension parity that the state currently pays the pension costs of all of the other school districts in the state except for Chicago. And the way that the current formula is worked out is that Chicago gets a lot of special grants and deals that are supposed to help them pay for that. Hasn't worked in recent years. They're facing a financial cliff basically at CPS. And so lawmakers say, fine, we'll give you the money that you need, at least some of it partially, not all of it, and you're not going to get pension parity for the rest of the time. You're going to get it for 1 year, but that has to come with reforms, and that's what we heard from Republicans. If you can give us comprehensive pension reform, which is a deal that would affect the entire state, then we'll give you this for the budget.
And it is interesting to see that this all came about because Governor Rauner, for the stopgap budget, willing to set aside his demands for reform. We do expect a long day here. Yesterday, 8 hours of meetings from lawmakers, those leaders behind closed doors and the budget gurus on both sides of the aisle, really hammering out some details and physically writing the language of these bills. Today, we may have expected a quicker day if they're going to rubber stamp this. Not so far. Let's talk about the process here. The House has 5 bills. They passed several so far, still waiting on that big appropriations bill, but it still needs to go to the Senate today, and it does need to get to the governor's desk and signed by the end of the day. Explain why, if we go past today, it's a huge problem compared to other deadlines that we've gone through.
It is the last day of the fiscal year. Unlike last year, lawmakers left regularly scheduled session at the end of May without any sort of budget. No education budget, nothing. So last year, Rauner had just vetoed all of the budget except for the education portion and the capital portion, and the state continued to operate, but at least we knew schools were going to open, construction projects weren't going to be halted. This year there was no budget on his desk, and so we waited this whole month, and they waited until the last day of the fiscal year. If we hit July 1, construction projects stop, local governments don't get their motor fuel tax money anymore, the gaming machine revenues, that doesn't go to local governments, 911 centers don't get their money, because throughout this entire process we had passed bills throughout this entire year to kind of keep government operating at certain points, to relieve this pressure, to relieve that pressure. Lottery winners was a big one.
Consent decrees and court orders, and the other big one was paying those state workers. Tens of thousands of state workers getting their pay, and that took some pressure off there as well.
So yeah, this is a completely different ballgame at this point. We have no budget in place, and so if we go into July 1, there's nothing. All of those appropriation authorities are suspended, they expire, and we start the fiscal year with halted construction projects and basically more of a government shutdown than we have seen this past year.
And July 1, an ugly word now because it is the midnight deadline tonight. If we go for another 12 hours just under without a budget, we hit that deadline, all of those temporary spending plans expire as well. Let's talk a little bit about some reactions so far, because it's easy to remind people, it's important to remind people that whatever may or may not be approved today only gets us through about December. This is not a full fiscal year budget, and so there's not a whole lot to celebrate even if they do accomplish something. You heard some applause behind us. That was not for the budget or anything like that. That was for honoring people, various housekeeping duties. duties. But if they do get something approved today, as we heard Minority Leader Jim Durkin here in the House say earlier today, not everybody's a winner, and a lot of people are losers in this because you're not getting everything that people need here. This is a stopgap budget.
It is a stopgap budget, so it's going to get us through the end of the year, 6 months, and it's also partial. We saw the temporary tax increase roll back when Governor Browner took office, and the state is short billions and billions of dollars of revenue. That revenue has not been proposed to be made up in any sort of way, and so this budget that is stopgap is only going to work with the revenue the state's expected to bring in, about $32 billion this year. So everyone's going to see a cut. You're not going to see a lot of people who are getting their full funding or what they're used to seeing, but it's going to keep government operating, essentially. I mean, these social services a lot of them have operated for a year without anything, and so they're going to at least get some relief, and it's going to keep things going. A key date, November. Everyone wants to get past the election. Once the election takes place, I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle will see how things are going to shape up, and then they can maybe move forward with a revenue, a full budget, maybe some of Governor Rauner's reforms. That's what he's hoping for, and so it's going to be a stalemate to the election, so everyone says, let's just keep government operating.
It's been a fascinating thing to watch over the past couple of weeks as we've gotten closer and more optimism comes about, because as reporters, a little more difficult to get people on the record talking about these secret negotiations behind closed doors. Nobody really wanting to mess up progress that's been made. So now that we finally have it, it'll be interesting to see reaction to the political gamesmanship. Who's going to come out and criticize afterwards? Who's going to tout this as a success? One of the things that we've heard people say is, again, no victory for anybody here. Does signing this budget without Governor Rauner's turnaround agenda reforms, does signing this alleviate the pressure to ever get those reforms on again? Does this encourage Democrats to 6 months from now in November, December, can we just hold out again and the governor doesn't get his reforms again?
I think insiders say that definitely is a fear. I mean, could we go 4 years, Governor Rauner's entire term, without a budget? Frankly, government has pretty much operated throughout this entire year without a budget, and when anything came up, lawmakers kind of figured out a way to fix it. And so could this be a sign of future things to come? We don't know, but every time that they pass one of those temporary spending bills throughout this year, we heard Speaker Madigan say, we can compromise, we can do this when the governor drops his harmful turnaround agenda, because Speaker Madigan and really many Democrats do not want to pass this agenda. It goes against their democratic principles. And so, yeah, I think this is definitely something that Republicans and maybe the governor are worried about, but at this point I don't think they had many options.
Putting the cart before the horse is the danger. Of course, it will be a long day. We want to make sure we get to that stopgap budget in the first place. We'll have plenty of updates all throughout. It's been a dismal year here in the State House, in both chambers and the governor's office. We've been following it all along, and not a whole lot of things to celebrate today included. Again, just a stopgap budget if it is approved. We're going to monitor all throughout the day and have multiple updates. A day unlike any other in Illinois history as they work to get something done before the end of the fiscal year, avoiding fiscal year 2017 without a state budget. We're going to send you back to regular programming. We will be breaking in when necessary with important developments. Again, billions of dollars at stake in the future of Illinois as well. For State House reporter Jordan Abadea, I'm Adam Reif. We send you back to regular programming.